Premier, it must be the month for birthdays, because I'm now very pleased to invite the Chief Executive Officer of Infrastructure WA, Phil Helberg, who had his birthday yesterday, to the stage to outline more detail about the draft strategy. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. As Phil comes to the podium, we're going to play you a short video. Thank you.
Infrastructure connects, enables and supports how we live, how we work, and what we're able to do. That's why, when it comes to infrastructure, Western Australia needs a long-term strategy that brings together the best ideas of government, industry and the community with a bold vision that looks ahead and sets the foundations for tomorrow, for the state we want in the future. Infrastructure WA is developing that strategy, planning ahead and putting fundamentals for state growth, diversification, well-being and sustainability in place. The strategy takes ideas generated from research, analysis and scenario planning, measured against realistic criteria and tested through extensive consultation and considered alongside everything Western Australia has and what our potential could be, to establish a plan that serves community and business needs over the long term. The result is Foundations for a Stronger Tomorrow, Western Australia's first state infrastructure strategy. It's a strategy that provides solutions which leverage Western Australia's advantages and unlock the full potential of Perth and our regions. It identifies 6 strategic opportunity areas that explore what our future as a prosperous state might present. It's a future as a global location of choice, brimming with livable, creative and diverse places and spaces, where we add value to the commodities that underpin our strong economy. It's a future that takes a digital-first approach, addresses climate change towards net zero emissions by 2050, and promotes and celebrates Aboriginal culture in ways that build capacity and increase opportunities for Aboriginal people and enterprises. It's a future where Western Australia grows and thrives by serving the world's growing consumer class, benefiting all Western Australians. Foundations for a Stronger Tomorrow is a strategy informed by many, so we can build the best state for years to come. Because the right infrastructure takes time to plan and deliver. So let's take time now. Let's keep our conversation going. We want to hear your feedback on the draft recommendations before we finalise the strategy and make it happen. There's no time to waste. Join the conversation before the 15th of September 2021.
Thank you, John, and good afternoon, everyone. Honourable Premier, Honourable Minister, Members of Parliament, both state and federal, ladies and gentlemen. It is a very proud moment to present to you WA's first draft state infrastructure strategy. It's the culmination of a challenging and complex process, but an equally interesting and rewarding one. Thank you also to Walter for his welcome to country. I'm equally proud to say that this strategy acknowledges and recognises the traditional owners of this land and their ongoing connection to it. Of course, the strategy didn't happen by itself. It's a result of very hard work and many, many conversations. So will you please bear with me for one moment when I ask the IW team to just stand up for a second. It's a bit slow, I know, but ladies and gentlemen, this is what sleep-deprived people look like. It's also though, what an incredibly talented, passionate and dedicated team look like. You guys have put your heart and soul into this, and I really want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. It's been an amazing job, and you can really be extremely proud of what you've achieved. In particular, can I also thank Lance Glare. He started this process as the acting CEO, and he continued to play a key leadership role throughout this process. So can you please join me in thanking all of them, please? Thanks, guys. Can I also acknowledge our board of directors, many of them here today. They have certainly helped us through this process through their support and their strategic direction. And I'm very thankful for all the extra board meetings that they had to attend towards the end. Special thanks to John and Nicole, our chair and deputy chair. They have been very generous with their time and their advice, and have been very hands-on in this process. And before I get to some of the details around the strategy, can I just thank everyone in this room, and there are too many to mention, who have had some sort of input or who have influenced the strategy in some way. We really appreciate that. So from the outset, we said we wanted to establish a vision for the strategy, one that's informed by the global context in which we operate, and one that plays to our strengths and identifies strategic opportunities, but one that's also balanced by a good dose of reality. These strategic opportunities you can see on the left of the slide were developed to build on our enviable strengths, such as our lifestyle, our strong economy, our Aboriginal heritage and culture, our natural environment, and our global position of strength in the shift towards a greener future. We call this our top-down approach, and many of you have helped us shape that vision. This was complemented by a bottom-up approach, which included a comprehensive review of existing government strategies and plans, and also informed by further stakeholder input, which involved many cups of coffee, I can say. Can I also thank each of the 823 people and organisations who took the time to respond to our discussion paper that we released last year. We certainly considered your feedback very carefully. Our next step led us to identify infrastructure responses to the challenges and opportunities identified through that top-down and bottom-up approaches. Informed by our stakeholders, yet again, we analysed and evaluated these responses to identify the ones that we believe will have a significant impact in addressing those challenges and opportunities. The result is Foundations for a Stronger Tomorrow, which creates that future blueprint. So as the name suggests, the strategy lays the foundations for the future. It takes a system-wide view that addresses the key fundamentals that are required to set us up for the next 20 years. And to ensure this system-wide view, the strategy addresses a broad range of infrastructure types, categorised as 9 sectors, which you can see to the right of this slide. They span across the traditional utilities, such as transport, and the social infrastructure sectors. This categorisation allowed us to identify synergies and interdependencies between these sectors, and as a result, 7 cross-cutting themes emerged, which underpin the development of this strategy. They include planning and coordination, infrastructure delivery, and asset management, to name a few. So what does this strategy look like? As mentioned by both the Premier and our Chair, it makes 6 key findings, which I will walk you through individually shortly. It consists of 88 headline recommendations, with many of them including multiple sub-recommendations. 48 of those relate to individual sectors, while 40 of them relate to the cross-cutting themes. And about 3/4 are non-build recommendations. They relate to things such as policy, regulation, procurement practice, and technology. In terms of the split between metropolitan and regional recommendations, 20% are regional, 90% are metropolitan, and 60% apply statewide. On the right of the slide, you can also see the proportionate split of recommendations by sector and cross-cutting theme. You will notice the significance of planning and coordination, Aboriginal matters, and transport in this breakdown. This brings us to the first of our key findings, which identifies the need to better manage the demand for new infrastructure, which is, as we know, costly to develop, operate and maintain. Simply building WA's way out of an increasing demand for infrastructure is an unaffordable and an unsustainable proposition. Instead, a greater focus on demand management and prevention initiatives is needed to ultimately divert, delay or avoid the need to build and maintain costly infrastructure. And this is where some of those interdependencies between the sectors are at play. Early intervention to address complex issues such as social disadvantage in the form of appropriate housing and wraparound services can help improve an individual's life outcomes and reduce demand on health and other social services infrastructure. For example, the strategy recommends addressing the social and affordable housing shortage through reviewing targets, sustained investment, and addressing the barriers that limit the attraction of alternative financing and funding options. As we move to low and zero emission vehicles, the strategy calls for an alternative pricing scheme at a national level to replace the current fuel excise scheme. And this new scheme could potentially help manage demand for roads through time of day and locational pricing signals. Our second key finding recognises that there's much good work being done. However, government agencies and trading enterprises' infrastructure strategies, plans and business cases are not always of adequate quality and consistency. And numerous infrastructure-related regulations are outdated and overly burdensome. The strategy focuses on improving system basics, recommending improved processes to guide agency planning, such as preparing and implementing a regional development strategic framework that builds on the work in the strategy to identify regional infrastructure priorities that play to each region's strengths, and developing and implementing an urban consolidation action plan that addresses the barriers to urban infill and incentivises further density. We also looked at how government procures infrastructure and how we can better leverage innovation as part of our procurement processes. Our third finding is a high priority issue raised by many stakeholders. It's a critical long-term issue impacting many infrastructure sectors, particularly water, transport and energy. We know that infrastructure not only contributes to climate change in the form of carbon emissions, but it's also impacted significantly by the effects of climate change. This is an issue that is not yet adequately addressed by many government agencies and trading enterprises. So the strategy recommends accelerating priorities that relate to infrastructure identified in the state's climate policy, including for government to develop and implement emission reduction and climate change adaptation plans, both at an agency level but also at a sectoral level. And for the state to diversify its investor base through issuing green, social and sustainable bonds. The strategy also recommends a range of measures to support and grow a green hydrogen industry in WA. The public sector's ability to capture data, to understand it and to process it and extract value from it is going to be incredibly important over the next 20 years. This is particularly relevant to infrastructure. Current access arrangements in the sector are vastly inconsistent, and in some cases critical data is not available or is not being shared. To improve this, the strategy recommends including developing better asset information policies, processes, platforms and standards. It also calls for improved sharing of information, not only within government agencies, but also between government and the private sector, to help identify surplus capacity or constraints in infrastructure networks. As the network and scale of the state infrastructure assets grow, so does the cost to operate and maintain the asset base. Getting more from our existing asset base not only avoids or delays having to build new infrastructure, it reduces the operational costs, which usually represents about 2/3 of the overall cost. The strategy recognises this and recommends taking a digital-first approach to all aspects of infrastructure lifecycle life cycle to not only inform the planning and the delivery of infrastructure, but also to increase its capacity and utilisation. We should always ask ourselves first, is there a digital answer to our question, whether it be a challenge or an opportunity? Improving maturity in asset management across the public sector and incentivising good practice in whole-of-life management practices should also be a priority. While many of the strategy's recommendations focus on non-build improvements to address fundamental elements of the infrastructure system, most sectors also include significant scale projects or programs recommended for investment or further planning. Some examples that you can see on the screen include a statewide digital connectivity infrastructure program, addressing essential infrastructure in remote Aboriginal communities, such as water and wastewater, power, municipal services and housing. Mental health infrastructure, including community-based and forensic mental health facilities, are also included, and a light rail or bus rapid transit system for Perth's inner and middle ring suburbs. So today we release the strategy for public comment, and we invite further feedback before it being finalised and presented to the Premier by the end of the year. It will then be under the stewardship of the government to review and respond to the recommendations. Supported recommendations will be transitioned to relevant government agencies and trading enterprises for implementation and delivery. Infrastructure WA will provide support where needed and take on a monitoring role of implementation. We will also publish an annual progress report. And finally, this will culminate in the development of a 10-year infrastructure program, which will outline the state's short to medium-term priorities. This program will also be updated each year. And of course, within 5 years, we will do all of this all over again and update the strategy as we progress implementation and adapt to inevitable change. The release of Foundations for a Stronger Tomorrow is the penultimate step in our journey. We will now embark on an 8-week consultation period, and your feedback on the recommendations is vital. Be that input on specific sectors or individual recommendations or the document as a whole. You can provide feedback via several channels, which will include a series of local and regional workshops and meetings, as well as our online survey. So please keep your eye on our website for the next opportunity. Again, we want to hear from you, and we need your input and advice to consider the questions that are shown on the screen. So to reduce our environmental footprint, you can access an electronic version of the strategy by scanning the QR code in the summary document that are provided on your tables. Or alternatively, you can download it from our website. I encourage you to read it and let us know what you think. Can I leave you with this message then, that our door is always open, and please, let's keep this conversation going. So in closing, can I just please thank the Property Council, Sandra and their sponsors for partnering us in hosting this event today. And I thank all of you for your interest and attendance here today. Thank you very much.